Hello, folks. Welcome. And this is Brother Mike. I'm broadcasting from the great city of Worcester, Massachusetts. It's been a while since I put anything on. I'm going to attempt to entertain you in a way. But, what I'm going to tell you in this video is something that I should have said many years ago. I'm motivated by a sense of guilt for not doing anything about this subject earlier. And we'll get right into it. I used to be in what they called the magazine business when I was younger. This is when I was like 19, 20, 21. And I used to have an associate. His name was Fred Ward. He was from Cleveland, Ohio. He used to work at the May Company. And he was kind of like my trainer and my partner. When I first got into the business, he was the guy that got me in, and he was the guy that showed me how to sell the magazines door to door. And boy, we used to have a lot of fun. We used to travel, and that was the best part of it for me. We'd go from city to city, state to state. I mean, I worked like 30 different states, so I got to meet people in all walks of life. It was a very educational experience for me, and I got Fred to thank for it. Even though him and we kind of got along like the Arabs and the Israelis. We were always at war over something, but there was a comradeship between us that comes from being on the road together. You know what I mean? And we had a manager. This guy was kind of like a father, a friend, a boss. For all intents and purposes, he was your god. He had the car, he had the money, he'd choose the itinerary, make all the hotel arrangements. Where we're gonna work this and that. A very knowledgeable man. His name was Dale Rodney. The guy was from Wisconsin. And we were part of a larger organization. There was just me and Fred. We had crews that were part of a larger organization, and this organization was called Opportunity Services Company. It was owned by a guy named Don Scott, and he resided in Chicago. The guy was like a multimillionaire. The offices of the company, I'll never forget. This is 40 years ago. We're on 2601 East Michigan City Boulevard, Michigan City, Indiana. And the organization had kind of like a gangster motif to it. They called themselves the Untouchables. Don Scott drove around the country in I think it was like a 47 Ford Coupe, kind of like a gangster car. And his whole aura that he had around him, really stunk of illegality. We had a party at his estate outside of Chicago one time, and he literally had men, big giant men with hands twice as big as yours, patrolling the grounds. I guess he was expecting company. I don't know. Maybe that's why he spent his time mostly on the road. Uh, and he managed a giant crew of about 50 people. We were all African Americans. Most of the guys that owned the company and were the authority figures, they were white. You know what I mean? And that's just the way it was. And when we went into a town, we'd take over the whole hotel. There'd be so many of us. And I mean, there was a dark side to it, but there was a bright side to it too. You know what I mean? And our little organization, Fred and me, because Dale wasn't very ambitious. He was satisfied with just having two people on his crew. We called ourselves Rodney's Rogues. And we were. We'd go from town to town and never really knew if a lot of those people got their magazines. But like I said, it was an interesting experience for a young guy. Anyway, so this guy Dale, he was really a piece of work. He could drink like there was no tomorrow. He had his beer delivered to the hotel by a beer truck. And when he invited you to have beer with him, you walked out of there like on all fours. You know what I mean? And he used to get himself in trouble every now and then. When he got real drunk, he'd get all maudlin and start carrying on about his time spent on a Georgia chain gang, because I guess in his earlier incarnation he used to operate a multi-state stolen car ring, and got caught and got put on a chain gang down in Georgia, and he'd start crying when he got real drunk, and you know I had chains on these ankles, but hey, he knew the country, he knew the business, he knew human nature very well. He knew Fred and me. He knew what made us tick. He knew how to get us to sell magazines for him, because if we were successful, naturally he's going to be successful. But anyway, we used to winter in warm climates, and we were at the Surfrider Hotel on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, California. We had ourselves a nice hotel room, me and Fred, we shared it right on the patio, with the swimming pool, right out there, you know what I mean? And the ocean down the street, right by the Santa Monica Pier, And, hey, that's what you did. Every magazine salesman in the world was like, practically in uh, California or Dallas or Atlanta at that time of the year. And if you were selling magazines, you had to like make deals with them, beat them off of your street. You know what I mean? There were so many of them down there. So the reason why I'm saying that is because, with all the competition and people, they get tired of people coming to their house trying to sell these magazines to them. They know the sales talk better than you. They get tired of seeing you, so it's hard to make money down there. And of course, managers don't like that. They always want you out there. But now Dale, he kind of liked being in Santa Monica because he had these comrades down there. They were business associates. Mostly in the illegal business. One guy had a yacht, doing very well for himself, and what he used to do is he used to smuggle Mexicans, from Mexico into California on this yacht. I guess he got paid for it. Then another guy that used to come over to the hotel and drink with Dale was, he was looked like just a regular businessman. You know what I mean? Always had a suit on, drove a nice big one of these giant Chrysler Imperials, with the big fins on the back, and all elaborate, and apparently, this man's game was stolen cars, so they were nice people, for the most part. They always treated you decent, but you minded your business. That was between them and Dale, and whatever they were doing, I don't know. You know what I mean? But we had other people that were staying at the hotel with us too. Other crews. Other managers. People in a similar position to Dale. Dale couldn't have a gun because he was a felon. And some of the other managers, they had pistols, because I mean, you never knew what you were going to run into, even from your own people. You're always hiring people constantly. You don't know who these people are. Half of them are criminals themselves with guns. A lot of my peers in the magazine business, they were armed and dangerous. You know what I mean? But Fred was a good guy, and Fred had a heart, and he wasn't a handsome man. Matter of fact, he really kind of resembled a gorilla. But boy, was he charming. And that was his key to success. When he sold women, he would charm them, and even when he sold men, he would charm them. And I don't know, you look at a big giant guy like Fred, he's a good sized guy, bow legged as hell, and got a face like an ape, you know what I mean? You know, you say there, but for the grace of God go I, you know what I mean? But he made his way along, and we even visited his hometown of Cleveland one time. He introduced us to his family. We went out to drink. So you spend enough time with a guy, you begin to like him. And as much as we didn't have in common, we had a lot in common. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because you know. people that like to drink, and people that have an economic motivation in what you do, and when you're not doing it too good, sometimes they get a little pissed off. So what happened was me and Fred were in our room, our hotel suite, basically, and it's probably maybe 10 o'clock at night. And here comes Dale, drunker than a snot bubble, good sized guy himself. If he swatted you with one of his arms, you'd feel it. You know what I mean? And he comes busted into the room, all belligerent and yelling and calling Fred and me names, because we're not making enough money. And I don't know. I guess this was his day to rage about this. Well, Fred, he really didn't feel like taking it. You know what I mean? And he got a little pissed off, and he asked Dale to leave, and Dale wouldn't leave, and this whole thing erupted into, I mean, a gargantuan fight. These are two heavyweights really going at it in this hotel room. They were breaking up furniture, they were punching each other. It was like a scene out of a movie or something. And I tried to break it up. As little as I was, I said, well, let me see if I could be the peacemaker here. I tried to break it up. I couldn't get in there. These guys were just too big. And then, to make matters worse, Fred turned on me. You know what I mean? And I remembered that he couldn't swim. So, what I did is I opened up the patio door and I was like backing off away from him with him coming at me in this maniac rage. And my plan was to like grab him and pull him into the swimming pool and hope that he drowns before I do. So, I mean, it was a mess. But anyway, so Fred ended up getting the better of Dale in this fight. And finally did get him out of the room. And Dale goes running down the way there and bangs on the door of this other manager. I forget the guy's name, but he ran all white guys. You know what I mean? Very seldom do crews of mixed races get together. And never do you run a crew that's integrated. You either run blacks or whites. And it just makes it easier when you're going down the road. But anyway, so Dale says to this guy, hey, so and so, whatever your name is, let me borrow your gun. I gotta shoot Fred. He's gone bad. And he was serious. In his drunkenness, man, he wanted a pistol so that he could eliminate Fred from the world, for basically humiliating him by throwing him out of the room and getting the better of him in this big fight. You know what I mean? But the guy had sense enough not to let Dale take the gun. But anyway, here's the point of the video. And, I mean, I should have said this a long, long time ago because Fred met a very undignified demise, I believe. Because, like I said, he was kind of like a sentimental guy. And, when you're in the hotel room together, occasionally, you talk about your family, you talk about home is big, you know what I mean? Because you're never near home. And he had pictures of home that he used to pull out every now and then and get a little sentimental about. He had some trinkets that belonged to his grandmother that he was particularly attached to. You know what I mean? He could become a very emotional kind of guy. You know what I mean? When he felt like it was safe. And you were friends and you could respect what he was saying, and vice versa. You know, so yeah, he had all this stuff and he cherished this stuff. Well, one day, which was very unusual because he was really my superior, and Dale would have him drive me around when Dale wasn't driving. Dale drove most of the time. He always liked to be in control. But when he wanted to take a day off or something like that, it was Fred's responsibility to spot me out, which means find an area for me to work and then come back and pick me up in a couple of hours and take me to another area and monitor my productivity and that type of thing, you know? Well, on this particular day, probably to spite Fred because of this fight, uh, Dale made me the driver. And I believe he told us to go down to Goleta, California, not too far. I think it's probably about 50, 60 miles, from Santa Monica, I believe that's where he sent us. But anyway, so I spot Fred out. And to make a long story short, I come back to pick him up, no Fred, you know? So I hung around the town for a little while, figured, well, maybe he's going to be a little late. Come back, no Fred, And, I stayed around until it was dark and drove around kind of looking, in apartment complexes where I thought Fred might go. And never did pick Fred up, so I ended up going back to the hotel by myself, and, checking the Dale and, give him his money. He gives me my money. I go back to the room and, well, this went on for quite some time, like weeks. We were there in Southern California, I think probably for about like a month or so, a month and a half. But Fred never came back, and I said to myself, geez, you'd think he'd come back for his grandmother's trinkets, and, the pictures. And I mean, all they had was the clothes on his back and what was in his pocket, and Fred just literally disappeared, and I never saw him again, you know? Well, a couple of years later, I got a little sick of Dale. I quit him, but then I went back, and, we did a travel tour with a friend of mine, Alan Rivers, all the way out to California, back to Santa Monica. It was wintertime. We couldn't stay at the Surf Rider anymore on Ocean Avenue, but, we got an efficiency down the street. So we were still near the pier, near Venice Beach. Very nice area, But so, the same thing happened. Dale got all drunk, came into my room with me and Alan and this other Mexican guy we had in there. I can't remember his name, But it was like, we had a stove. It was like a apartment, basically, what I mean, for the winter. And me and him had a big old fight, and, we collapsed the kitchen table. I think I might have pulled a butter knife on him. He was scaring me because he was big, you know what I mean? But I managed to get him out of there. And then the next day, when I went to check in with him, oh, he was really pissed off, and he was kind of scraped up, and he was calling me like the N word, and I'll show you how I take care of people like you. Well, I had my car packed just in case, you know what I mean, because I knew that Dale had these criminal friends down there, and I put one on one together when I says, hey man, this is probably what happened to Fred, no doubt, because Dale jumped on the phone. He says, I'll show you how I take care of a knife pulling, cop calling nigga like you. And he started to make a phone call, And that's when me and Alan just bolted from the room and jumped in the car that I had parked about 2 blocks down the street, all packed and everything. And we headed back to Massachusetts, But, if there's anybody out there, this is the reason why I want to do this video is, you know, I'm thinking about Fred's family in Cleveland. They're probably like, whatever happened to Fred, I mean, this is 40 years ago, And guy don't show up. Maybe he did show up, I don't know. But all my life, it's been like dogging me. What happened to Fred Ward? Did Dale kill him? In my opinion, if there's somebody out there and they know Fred Ward and they're from Cleveland, they're his relative, nephew, or something like that, because everybody's probably getting old now, and you have always wondered what happened to Fred Ward, I think Dale Rogney killed him. No doubt Dale Rogney's dead now, you know what I mean? But I think I think Dale murdered Fred Ward. So, you know, If you know anything about it, leave a comment, all right? And I got it off my back. That's all I wanted to do. I've been holding this in for as long as, I've been a grown man, you know what I mean? And I really like Fred. I thought Fred was a nice guy. I thought he deserved better. I thought that Dale was kind of a psychopath. I thought Don Scott was a racist, because I believe this Opportunity Services Company, I think they were put out of business by a Senate subcommittee because the way they treated African American people was tantamount to slavery, really. You know what I mean? And anyway, thank you for listening. Try to keep it under 30 minutes for you because, Brother Mike is kind of long winded, but kind of good to be back and kind of get off the topic of politics and whatnot, and these Worcester police who are doing better. I have to say we haven't had any bad news out of the Worcester police since we got a new police chief over there. And of course, Jesus loves you, and I love you. So you guys have a great day and subscribe to my channel too, will you? I got more better stuff to come.